Leadership. It's a word we often tie to titles and boardrooms. But what if we've had it all wrong?
Leadership is not a title, it's a mindset.
Today I talk with Dr. Karyn Gordon, who believes leadership isn't a position. And the earlier we develop it, in our teams, in our children, in ourselves, the more resilient, clear, and connected we become.
For any parent that's listening, you want to start developing leadership in your children really young. Like actually, you can start teaching leadership development actually by kind of grade 1.
She's the author of The 3 Chairs, a framework that has reshaped how leaders lead, how parents parent, and how people define their worth. Not by applause or approval, but by clarity and inner confidence. This is the Curiosity Blueprint, brought to you by Flying House Media. Yes, this episode is about leadership, but it's also about becoming the kind of person others can trust to go first. Let's get into it. All right, so Dr. Karyn Gordon, I am so excited to sit down with you today. You're all the way in Canada. It would be great if we were in person, but I am thrilled to learn a little bit more about leadership and everything that you've been working on over the last many, many years. And you have this amazing book, 3 Chairs. I can't wait to dive into all of it. So first of all, just thank you for being here. I'm really excited.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad we could find a time. And I just can't wait to dive into this amazing topic around leadership and communication and how that impacts in literally every part of our life. So at work, with our team, with clients, but also in our personal life actually as well.
Well, do you think that there is a misconception of what leadership truly is? I find sometimes that people don't really understand the definition of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in fact, it's interesting because a lot of times people will be like, they'll introduce me as a leadership expert or a leadership relationship expert. And then a lot of times say, but I'm not. And then the people will say, well, I'm not a leader. I'm like, no, leadership is not a title. It's a mindset. And you actually, not only is that really important for people to kind of like start understanding, but leadership, the development of leadership actually starts really young. Like we often think we have to wait till we get a position within a company to start working on leadership development. But for any parent that's listening, you want to start developing leadership in your children really young. Like actually, you can start teaching leadership development actually by kind of grade 1. So this is something I think you're absolutely right. There is a misconception. A lot of times people don't really understand with what it is, but leadership actually starts developing extremely young.
That's so interesting. How could we, I'm a father of 3. Okay. I have 3 kids ranging from 6 to 16.
Yeah. How
is it that we as parents can start teaching our children how to be leaders?
I know. See, isn't this fun? We thought we were going to start in the career side, and also we start in the family side. And this is one of the reasons why I love my work, because I've done this for coming up on 30 years, and people love that I've been doing this for a long time. So I started in the family side, and then I started working with businesses, but I'm still trained as a professional with families. And so it's this topic that will literally apply to all parts of our life, which is why people love it. But leadership, really, when you think about leadership, it's somebody who has really got clarity on a vision. Okay, they have clarity on a vision with where they want to go, what is important to them, and then they're making decisions accordingly to help drive that. So when you think about leadership development, really, and you'll probably hear this with lots of different experts, they'll say leadership starts with self. Okay, leadership starts with self. Well, so when we think about it from a child perspective, we want to help our children understand their sense of self. So I've got twins that are 17 years old. And so we have started these conversations a long time ago about getting them to get clarity. Like, what is it you want? What is important to you? And so people often think like, oh my goodness, that's like a teenage thing or a 20 thing. No, you start when they're little. You start kind of building into those conversations. So everything from, I remember when my boys were like in grade 3, and we were trying to figure out what extracurricular activities that they should be in. And, we were having this conversation because, obviously there's gazillion amount of options now with what kind of programs kids want to be in. And so we started asking questions to our boys around, how busy do you want? Do you want to be out every single night? Do you want to have maybe 2 nights in? Think about your own energy. Think about what is it that you want? What is it that you think you need to feel fully energized? We were starting to have those conversations with them when they were in grade 3 and grade 4. And And it was amazing because they were starting to get clarity on what they needed. One's more of an introvert, one's more of an extrovert. And one of them said, I think I'd like to be out like every night because I've got lots of activities. The other one's like, you know what? I don't want to be out every night. I'm more of an introvert. I kind of need to be at home a little bit more. And so based on that self-awareness and knowing about who they are, they were then able to make decisions accordingly. So that's a good example on, really, as parents, we want to start having those conversations with our children, help them understand their sense of self, because when you have clarity, it will literally impact decision making, which, as we know, is everything. Great leaders are really good communicators. They've got clarity of vision, and they're phenomenal decision makers because there's an alignment around with what it is that they want.
Well, and I think what's really good to think about with that is my older children, 16 and 13 years old. My daughter is she's definitely more of a homebody.
Yeah.
She does her work. She keeps her nose in her paper. My son is a social butterfly. So it's not really as much about saying what a leader is, but what type of leader are you?
Yes. Yeah. And what is it? Yeah. Again, thinking about leadership really starts with self, having a good and a really great self-awareness. What is it you want? What is important to you? What are your values? What are the options? Now, when we have that framework, now let's kind of like start leaning in and actually helping our kids make decisions. You know, it's really interesting. One of the biggest complaints I hear from companies that we work with, one of the biggest complaints of the next generation is that they don't know how to make decisions. It's so interesting. And part of it is because as parents, a lot of us have made the decisions for our kids. Go to this school, go to this college, do this part-time job. You should be friends with this person. And we've done all the decision making. Decision making is a really important leadership skill. And so, we help our kids. We start learning those because we actually have a great leadership course. We offer it once a year. It's actually starting next month. And it's actually helping parents with their teenagers and their preteens develop some of these leadership skills. Because once you have these tools in your toolbox, it makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, it seems that way. It becomes a roadmap for you on how you move forward.
Yeah, and all of a sudden things don't become so complicated. You know, it's interesting. I've been doing this for a long time, and people often ask me, like, is the culture any different? Are the needs any different? And yeah, there's peripheral stuff that's different for sure. But the core needs of humanity, the core needs are exactly the same as when I started. I wrote and came up with the 3-chair concept over 25 years ago. I mean, before the internet, before social media. It's this, I've been teaching it for years now. It's exactly the same, that our culture has changed, but the core needs actually have not changed. So that I think is a really important piece to it. It's principles that are timeless.
Well, let's talk about the 3 chairs a little bit. If you can walk me through the concept and who it is that's sitting in each of these 3 chairs.
Sure. And for everybody watching and listening right now, I'm going to kind of give a high level in terms of what the 3 chairs are. This will impact every single person that's listening and watching. It will impact us, our teams, our clients, our people that we serve, our spouses, and our children. Like, this is one of those topics that literally transcends with all age groups. So I'm a visual learner. So can you see that okay? I'm holding it up.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
Yep.
Okay. So I came up with the concept because I was working years ago at my family practice, and I had a teenager. I talked about this. I did a YouTube video, not YouTube. I did my TED Talk about this, and it went viral. It did extremely well 2 years ago. It was like top 6 most viewed in the world. So for people that want to kind of go deeper on it, they can kind of like check that out. But in terms of kind of the overall flow, so basically what I found is that I started because there was this teen girl in my office, and she was talking about how she didn't like who she was. She had very low self-esteem, very low confidence. And I remember saying to her, you know, what's being done about this in your school? And she said, nothing. And so I thought, well, I'm going to do something. And so this is before the internet. Where did I have to go for good research before the internet? Is the
library.
The library, yes. I know. So there I was, University of Toronto, going up and down this ladder because, you know, they had journals at the top of this shelf. So I'm climbing up and down this ladder, pulling these journals off and dusting everything off because nobody's ever reading it. And I started pouring through all the research around self-esteem and confidence. I was really focused on confidence at the time. And as I'm kind of pouring through the research, all of a sudden I started seeing this very crazy pattern. And this pattern was these 3 attitudes kind of emerged. And these 3 attitudes predicted decision-making when we were talking about decision-making. And I remember looking at it going, oh my goodness, this is crazy. This is so powerful. How can I make this come alive for teenagers? So for anybody who's a public speaker, any motivational speaker, they will tell you the hardest audience to speak to are high school students. They will love you or they will hate you. And so you've got to be just really phenomenal in that kind of environment. So I thought, how can I make this concept of attitudes and confidence and mindset, how can I make it come alive? So I thought about doing it as a skit. So I came up with this 3-chair concept. And I remember the very first time I drove up to my first school that I did it at, I thought I was going to throw up in the car. I was like so scared going, oh my goodness, I hope this thing works. But I did in front of my first school and in front of 500 students. They loved it. And so this is basically with what it is. Okay, so high level, I would have 3 chairs on a stage, and I would have a teenager sit in each of those chairs. And I would give them a little character sketch and they would act on improv the character. I started teaching this in high schools, then I started teaching it to elementary schools, and now I teach it to businesses because I realized that this essentially is I didn't know it at the time, it's actually a leadership framework, which I didn't even know. And it kind of all evolved. So here we go. All right, so everybody listening and watching, I want you to think to yourself, which one sounds like you? Which one sounds like your team? Which one sounds like your spouse? Which one sounds like your children? Okay, so just kind of have that lens as we go through it. The one on the left chair, and you can, get the book and you can kind of go a little bit of a deep dive on it. The left chair is what I call the blind attitude. This is the person that they are blind to their own strength. So, you might say, oh my goodness, you're so smart, you're so good, you're so talented, you're so athletic. And they're like, oh, whatever, you're just saying that. They downplay compliments. They don't believe, they don't have full, they just don't believe they're worth it. They have this, the very prevailing thought that I am not enough. Okay. And there's a very loud thought pattern in their head. So they can look externally successful, but internally they are blind to their own value. Okay. So that is the left chair. The right chair is what I call the arrogant attitude. They're arrogant. They're cocky. They're full of themselves. They put people down. They don't care how it makes other people feel. I'm sure we've all had bosses like this, or neighbors, or teachers, or family members kind of like this. It's also known as false self-esteem. So they come across as incredibly, almost overly confident. And people often get confused. What really is the difference between that chair and that middle chair? That right chair, there is no humility. Okay, they have no humility. That's the difference. Okay, so then you've got the middle chair. The middle chair is what I call the confident attitude. And what makes that person different is they have this beautiful sense of confidence about themselves. Confidence that I am worthy, I am enough. If I get to school, I'm so proud of myself. If I don't, I'm okay. I'm still okay. So they have this very deep understanding of their worth. That really is that middle chair. And they also have humility. So it's also that person that says, I know a lot, but I don't know everything. So I'm going to be more open to feedback. I'm going to be more open to ask for help. And so that is that beautiful sense of confidence in that chair. So understanding the 3 chairs is pretty easy. Most people can get it really fast. Where it's fascinating is the research and the science around if somebody's sitting in that left chair or somebody's sitting in that right chair, how does it impact their decision making? Okay, and that's where you can almost predict based on science how people are going to make decisions based on those mindsets. And this is where in leadership and in business, it's fascinating because, if I'm talking to a teenager and they're sitting in this chair, it will impact who they choose as their partner of who they're going to date or their friends. It's fascinating. If I'm working with the CEO of a company and he's sitting in this chair, it will impact in terms of how he leads. So it's the first step I get people to think about is which chair are you sitting in the majority of the time? And then the second step to think about is specifically, and to make this relevant, where I sit, how does it impact the decision-making that I am facing right now? And things like communication, goal setting, risk-taking, feedback. In the book, I talk about, I think about 12 different areas in terms of where you sit actually impacts the decisions.
Well, and you just kind of covered this because my one thought is on any given day, you could find yourself in any one of those chairs.
Absolutely.
So it's about that self-awareness of recognizing that.
Yes, absolutely. And what's really also interesting is, and this comes up all the time, people can sit in different chairs in different environments. So for example, when I've done a lot of podcasts when the book came out, I would have a lot of leaders say, at work, I sit in that middle chair. But when I go home, I fall back. I don't assert myself. I don't stand up for myself. Or some people say, at home, I sit in the middle chair. When I get to the work, I move all those over here. So the framework. So what's been very helpful is once people can see it, they all of a sudden, it's an amazing self-awareness tool, because all of a sudden people are like, oh, okay, so in this environment I'm here, in this environment I'm here. Or you can also do based on categories. So I have some clients over the years, they'll say, when it comes to school and academics, I sit here, I feel really confident. But when it comes to socially and friendships, actually, I fall back. So you can kind of actually start looking at these different parts of your life and where do you sit in different environments and even different topics. And then all of a sudden now we're starting to kind of wake people up. It's like almost like an awakening exercise. And then once they start getting a little bit of awareness of it, then we start talking about, okay, what does the middle chair look like? What are those skills that we all need to be developing to really help ourselves sit in that middle chair?
That is really interesting. I was mapping out my life as you were saying that.
Really? Yeah.
And I'm definitely sitting in a different chair here than I am in other situations at times.
Sure.
And I think part of it is sitting in that, when you are sitting in that middle chair, there is confidence, but communication and decision-making is work, and it can be tiresome. So I think for me, sometimes it is the ability to go home and turn that part of me off and let somebody else steer the ship in a little bit of a way.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily insecurity peeking in, or I hope that I'm never sitting on the right chair, but it is interesting to think there is energy involved in leadership, and sometimes you just need to turn the off switch on.
100%. And realizing that it is sometimes really important just to let other people lead. And sometimes my husband and I joke, we've been married for over 20 years, but we also are business partners. And it's very interesting. In certain parts of the business, I lead, and in certain part of the business, he leads. And with our family, the same thing. In certain parts of our family life, I lead, and in certain parts, he leads. And I am just so happy to step back and let him lead. And so it doesn't mean that leadership means we always have to be kind of the one in charge. Sometimes leadership is actually letting somebody else kind of lead because they've got a better set of skills in that area, so it's not everything. But you mentioned something that I think is really important about communication. So, and this is a big question I get asked from a lot of people is, what are those skills? Like, if people are really thinking, I want to sit in that middle chair, I want to sit there, I want my kids to sit there, I want my team to sit there. There are essentially 5 core skills, and I talk about it in the book, 5 core skills that we all need to develop, and we can start developing them young with our children, certainly as our adults and with our team. But there's 5 core skills. So, and I love acronyms. I was diagnosed with a learning disability when I was in grade 8. And I learned later that part of my learning disability was in terms of how I process information. And it's been a blessing and a curse. The time it was a curse, now it's a blessing, because I started actually learning that pattern making was the way that I actually organized information, which is, I think, why I came up with the 3 chairs. I think my LD is actually the one that actually got me to create this, which is kind of a crazy story. But acronyms are one of the ways that I realized I could chunk information. I could see so much information, but I could start seeing patterns in it, and then I could chunk them to help my brain actually remember. So, and I've, over the years learned that a lot of people also learn the same way. So for everybody listening, these are the 5 core skills, and it spells the acronym CARDS. Okay. And so when you think about, what are those 5 core skills I need to learn to sit in that middle chair? So here are the 5 skills. And we actually have a scorecard for people that don't want to write this all out. We've got a scorecard. It's on our website, dkleadership.org. It's free. You can just download it, but it's actually a really good one-pager. It's like a scorecard. You can actually measure yourself based on it. So anyway, that's a great resource. Okay, so C stands for your communication skills. Okay, so being able to be very assertive. So people who are over here, they tend to be passive aggressive. People over here tend to be aggressive. So somebody in that middle chair, they're very assertive. Okay, so they know what they want, and they have the confidence to stand up for it. Okay, so C stands for communication. A stands for your attitude of yourself, but also your goal setting skills. So somebody in that middle chair, they have clarity on their goals. They know what they want to do. They know what they want to achieve. Very, very important. R stands for relationship skills. This person realizes that the way I see it is different than how you see it. So really trying to put ourselves in the shoes of somebody else. This is where gender differences, personality differences, racial differences, multi-generations really play into it. So that's the 4th one is huge. The 4th one is decision-making, self-discipline, and time management skills. So a lot of people don't realize that decision making is actually a huge part of this, because somebody who's really confident in the middle chair, they have clarity about, this is what I want, this is what's important to me, but I'm going to step on the gas. I'm going to take initiative. I'm not just thinking about something, I'm taking action. And in that process, that actually helps to build self-esteem. So now you can start thinking about, as a parent, oh my goodness, I can totally see now why these skills are so critical that we can actually start teaching our kids. So that's D, is decision making. And the last one, which is really important also right now, is stress and energy emotion management skills. So someone who is sitting in that middle chair, they have clarity about, here's what I want. This is my goal. I'm going to step on the gas. I'm going to really kind of go after this. I'm going to ask for help because I'm not arrogant. I've got humility. So I'm going to ask for help if I need it. And because I'm going after it and I've now managed my time well, my stress tends to be really low and I'm actually managing my emotions at a very high level. So when we talk about this whole mental health issue that's happening right now in certainly in America, it's happening globally. A lot of it actually comes down to that core skill. A lot of us don't have that self-awareness. They don't know what are the things I need to do differently to actually help myself in terms of my emotion management. So it's all correlated with that middle chair. So those are the five. Those are the five core skills.
And if we can go back to D, because one thing with decision making is I wonder, is this about decisiveness or always being right? Because I think one thing that I find with my team is that I try and be very forthcoming, is that I'm going to make the decision.
Right.
Sometimes I'm going to be wrong, and I have no problem telling you I was wrong.
Right.
So is it that decisiveness or is it that correct decisiveness?
It is. It's actually a couple things, and this is a really good point. So it's being decisive, saying based on the information that we have in front of us, this is the best decision that I think we should be making based on the information that we have in front of us, and taking action. And also being willing to admit when you're wrong. So somebody over here, they're not going to admit. They might be really decisive.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they will not tell you if they're wrong. In fact, they will blame you. They will blame you that it's because of you that we got into our, so even if they made actually the decision. So you can, again, just think of all the leaders that we have in our life, all the people in positions of leadership in business, in politics, and education, like in media, like in all the different areas. You can kind of like start seeing with where people actually are sitting. But that is a huge piece of actually somebody who's actually sitting over there.
Sure. Well, I wonder, I have two questions at the forefront, so I'm just going to pick one and go with that.
Okay.
Because what's at the front of my mind as well is the difference between, and I think this is where a lot of confusion happens, is the difference between a leader and a manager.
Yes.
I think those two things the lines seem to be blurred at times. Can you talk me through what is the real difference between those two?
Well, it kind of goes back a little bit to with what we were talking about, because a manager could be a leader, right? So because when you think about leadership is really a mindset. Okay. So when I think about a great leader, that's what everything in our company, our whole purpose is to develop great leaders at work and at home. That's kind of our purpose. I want to have great leaders in businesses and organizations and great leaders that are running their family, and so leadership is a mindset. Okay. So think of it that first. I think what we want to do also is to differentiate between a role, because the function of a leader versus a function of a manager. So the function of a leader in most organizations is they are really casting the vision. They're the visionaries. They're the ones that are really saying, this is where I think we should actually go. And then they kind of like pass that baton to their team, their senior leadership team, those managers, in terms of how to basically, what is the best way for us to get from point A to point B. So it's more of a functional. So there's attitude and there's function. And so again, that's why I want managers to have the mindset of a leader, even though they don't actually have a talent. I want emerging leaders to have a mindset of a leader, even though they don't actually have it. But you want to make sure it's just differentiating between mindset and function.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that resonated with me so much about your book, is that I think you mentioned at the top that people are waiting to be put in these decision-making roles in order to start being a leader. But really, for me, I want every single person on my team to have a leadership mindset, own their circle of this. And that's why with my team, I'm so lucky with the team that I have, is that there are areas that they're much stronger in than I am.
Yeah.
And so what that means, I can let them take ownership over those things.
Yes.
So I too, that really is what struck me so much, is that leaders, one, can be made, but number two, it is not a position, it is a mindset.
Right. And I think that's a message for everybody in business. And in our professional life, this is a really important thing, that we want to help develop the leadership mindset, because you want, let's say you're a manager of a team of, let's say, 7 or 8 people. You want your team to be sitting in that middle chair where they are being assertive and they're speaking up if there's a problem. They're asking for help if there's a concern. They're prioritizing their time, so they're getting tasks done. They're highly productive. They know how to set boundaries. Right? That's another big, huge piece of the person in the middle chair. They know how to set boundaries so that they are managing their emotions. They can be very calm when they're actually talking to people. So those are all leadership skills, even though the person may not actually have a title. So one of the companies we work with in Dallas, it's interesting. I did this they had a company of about 150 people. And the CEO and the VP, they wanted me to come and kind of explain the 3 chairs to their team. So I was explaining it, and it was so interesting. They came up to me afterwards. They said, Karyn, it makes us realize that we want to hire people according to that middle chair. This has now given us a framework with who should we hire? Who should we promote? Because this is a really big thing. A lot of times in organizations, people get promoted because they've got a technical skill. You can have a great technical skill and super smart and very high IQ, and you're sitting over here or here. You're going to have a problem with retention. I can guarantee it.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure, yes, you have the technical skills, but you're hiring and promoting based on that middle chair. And all of a sudden it gives this really simple, easy framework for people to get really fast.
Yeah. Now, is there a way for, again, and I don't want to confuse roles and mindset, but say for me, if I am bringing somebody in and I want to help them develop into a leader, what are steps that current leaders can take to help anybody get this mindset in their workplace?
No, it's a great question. So the easiest first step is get the free scorecard, because it's a 1-pager. And I would actually get the person to do their own evaluation. I would not do it for them. I would print it. Again, it's free. Get them to do their own evaluation. And because it kind of goes through every single of those 5 cards, it kind of gives you kind of actionable items of what each five different skills look like. And then all of a sudden you kind of can see where they're doing well and with what needs work. And I do use that scorecard in all kinds of different environments. And it's really interesting. In different levels of position, different parts of those skills will pop up. So for example, if I'm working with a senior leadership team, they've got, a lot of times they're really good with their communication. They're actually pretty good with their communication. They're pretty good with their attitude and their goal setting. They're actually even pretty good in terms of the relationship skills. Where a lot of them start kind of getting some roadblocks is their time management, not setting boundaries, taking on too many things. And then because of that, their stress is super high. Very interesting. So I see that more on senior leaders, okay? Entrepreneurs and senior leaders that we work with. When I work with emerging leaders, people that are just kind of starting that career, a lot of them, they might have the attitude and goal setting, but they really struggle with kind of almost all of them. They struggle with not knowing how to be assertive, how to communicate, how they tend to see things in a very kind of black and white kind of mentality, like I'm right, she's wrong. And part of, again, that middle chair is that relationship skill, realizing that people see things differently. People will interpret things differently. So I actually quite love working with emerging leaders and these new hires and these new grads, because a lot of times they're very ambitious, but a lot of them, they may look really confident, but a lot of them kind of sit over there. They identify, that's what they tell me. They're indecisive. They're afraid to make a phone call. They're afraid to ask for feedback. They want feedback, but they're afraid to get it. They kind of, a lot of them struggle with anxiety. So there's a massive issues. And so they just haven't developed those core skills. But as parents, I'm telling you, let's kind of take that scorecard and let's try to teach those skills to our children. So by the time they enter the workforce, they've got those skills.
Well, there's one other skill. And for me, this is an area where when I see myself slipping,
right.
One area that I may struggle with is that ability to say no, which you talk about in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And saying no is so powerful, and something that whenever I notice myself getting in that place of I should have said no, but for whatever reason I didn't, my first thought is I need to teach my kids
Yes.
that it's okay to say no.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like this is you take those 5 core skills because high level people are like, okay, I want my kids to sit in that middle chair. Great. So you want to teach your kids that you've got to teach them those 5 skills. Teach them the importance about saying no. Our sons, like I said, we've got twin boys, and it was really interesting with decision making this summer. Again, self awareness. They on their own initiative, they both got jobs, which were really big. We're very big into jobs for them. One worked at a camp. It aligned with his value system. And the other one wanted to work at a golf course because that was, he wants to golf. He's training for a marathon. That's great. But when it came to decision making around how much to work and how should he still work in the fall when school starts or not? And again, that decision making, he said, I think I'm going to actually tell them I can work full time for like the 10 weeks. And then once school starts, I'm actually going to say I need to wrap it up because I need to be able to focus on school. Having that kind of boundary. Yeah. Being able to say that, like he's 17 years old. Like so these are kind of the skills. Time management, we talked about, and again, that's the 4th skill, the D, the decision making and time management. I'm really big on teens learning time management because, when he's got shifts that start at 5:30 in the morning, I'm not waking him up. We've taught him this. We've planted a lot of seeds. So he's setting his own alarm clock. He knows what time to go to bed the night before so he can get up in the night in the morning by himself. So these are kind of those fundamental leadership skills I really want parents to be teaching their kids. We do this, we're going to have a very different generation. But unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of parents that are doing too much work still. And we're seeing the cost of that.
Well, I think what you're saying too about your son knowing to set the alarm clock for his 5:30 in the morning. My daughter is a swimmer. She's out the door at 5:15 every morning for swim practice. The alarm clock conversation after a while years ago got frustrating for everyone involved.
Right.
And it just makes me think of micromanaging. I think people don't realize you can micromanage your kids.
Yes.
So giving them those skills to understand I need to take ownership of this, I need to take responsibility, has just made that whole conversation so much easier.
Yes.
Because now we're not sending reminders. Now we're able to spend our time talking about the important parts of it.
Yes. Yes. So, with your daughter, you went through a series of training. Okay. Like it was kind of like, this is my role as a parent and this is your role as a young person. And I'm going to give you this responsibility. It's actually not my job. My job is not to be waking you up. I'm going to pass that job to you. But there's a training process, right? We had to do the same training process with our kids. So I think part of it with parents is a lot of times we do this all or nothing. It's kind of like, well, I'm managing it. And then like, no, you know what? That's it. I'm done here. I'm going to give this to you, but we haven't trained them. So we have to be gracious with kids. I love young people. I love children. That's part of the reason why I still leave a certain part of my professional life still working with families. I do about 80% working with organizations globally, but 20% still with families, because I really, really want families to be able to take these tools and let's start teaching them to our children so that they can actually reap the benefits of it.
Well, and let's talk about communication. We talk about training and we talk about all the 5 most important qualities of somebody sitting in that middle chair. Communication is at the forefront of all of this. And the way I see it is it's not only being able to communicate clearly and concisely, but a big one for me is always being able to explain the why behind something. And I've seen by taking deliberate action into making sure that anyone on my team or my family understands the why, even if it's a very simple task, understanding why changes the game for them. So I'm curious your thoughts on that explanation of why and how that has impacted people both in the organizations and at home.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I love Simon Sinek's work, and I know that's a huge part of his messaging, and I 100% agree with it. It does a couple things. When I started expanding from family work to businesses coming up on 20 years ago, when I first made that transition, I was asked from a lot of businesses to talk about the multi-generations, because in Canada, I became quite well known as a teen expert. That's kind of where my career started. And then teens turned into millennials, and millennials entered the workforce. And so a lot of companies that were sponsoring my work on the parenting side, they started hiring millennials. They didn't understand them. So when I started working with businesses, I learned very quickly that the multi-generations, they don't understand each other. There was a lot of confusion with communication. And one of the things that came up all the time is managers would be all upset going, this person on my team, they're asking why all the time. That's like so disrespectful. And they would misinterpret what was happening. I'm like, no, they're not being disrespectful. They just don't understand. And they're trying to connect the dots. This is a good thing. So don't see it as a threat. See this as actually them trying to lean in and understand it. So the why is really important. And I would definitely agree that somebody who is a great leader and has that mindset is sitting in that middle chair. They've got clarity about their vision, what they want. They can communicate clearly. They're also able to think about their audience. What is their audience? What does their audience need to hear? When does their audience need to hear it? How does their audience need to hear it? So they're really kind of thinking not just about the content, but about the how. And the why really kind of gels it all together because it helps connect the dots, especially in change management. So a lot of times, old school would have been right, the left chair going, this is the way we're doing it, suck it up, this is the change. And the new manager, the new leader, I would even say maybe more about the new parent. It's kind of this someone saying, this is a change that I believe as a family we need to make. Here is why. And when we kind of have that kind of clarity and we're giving the why, people are more likely to get on board with it because they're like, okay, that makes sense. I certainly know as a parent, if I just tell my kids, this is the change, I'll see this resistance. If I say, this is the change that we're making and here is why, it's so interesting. I'll hear them say, okay, that makes sense. And all of a sudden their whole, even though they maybe didn't like the change, if I can explain the logic and how to connect the dots, then it changes the game in terms of their engagement. So it's something that's really important that you can apply both in businesses, but also in your family.
Well, and I don't know what the neuroscience is behind it, but for me, it helps tremendously with memory formation. I know it's the way I operate as well, but if I understand why I'm doing something, I am much more inclined to remember it the next time. And I noticed that with my team and with my family as well, is sometimes there needs to be that connecting of the dots for the logic to kind of come into place.
No, you know what? That's actually really interesting. I've actually never seen anything about that, but that would make a lot of sense to me, actually. It is because when we have the why, it impacts engagement. We're listening more. We're leaning in. In some ways, it's a very empathetic part of the conversation because, especially with change management, for a lot of people who have change, there's anxiety. So when we are certainly, whether or not it's change that you're sharing in the office or change that you're sharing in home, when you're kind of saying something about change, a lot of people kind of get anxious. Anxiety is very correlated with change. So when we can explain why, it kind of softens it. It's almost like an empathetic part of the conversation. And a lot of times we're saying it in a way, hopefully, that our audience can actually hear it. So they're like, okay, that makes sense. And so, yeah, I can totally see people kind of leaning into it, paying more attention, and then how that actually affects memory. I've actually, like I said, I've never seen anything specifically on the memory, but just the way you were describing it, I'm not surprised by that. That would make total sense.
And maybe it's just a learning pattern of mine, but it's just what I've always noticed is it seems to work. The other really important thing I think to note is I think this goes all with communication, but specifically with explaining the reasons why and being decisive. It builds trust.
Yes.
So how important or actually what I should say, what are the elements that a leader needs to have in order to build that trust? What are the kinds of actions that you've found that teams will follow because now they trust that leadership?
Oh, that's such a good question. And trust building is very much part of correlated. I talk about it in the book, but let me talk about that middle chair mindset and how that impacts trust. So a number of things. Number one is their words and their actions match. So when I say, and I'm part of your team, I'm going to give this to you by Friday, and I give this to you by Friday, now you can trust me. So words and actions have to match. Now, if I say, okay, I'm going to give this to you on Friday, and I hit Thursday, and I realize, oh my goodness, this is going to need more time, then what's also going to build trust is for me to pick up the phone and say, here's what's happened. I want to be completely honest. I've tried as best as I could, but I've hit a couple of roadblocks. So how do you feel if I was to give it to you on Monday? So that would still build trust, Okay, because I'm being now forthcoming with information. So words and actions have to match. This is critical. And this is a huge piece because a lot of times if we're sitting in that left chair, we may want to please people. So we might just say, yes, I'll do it. Yes, I'll do it. Yes, I'll do it, knowing that we can't do it. So in the short term, we think it's helping a person because they feel good that we say yes, but in the long term, it's actually going to massively impact our trust. They'll stop trusting us. So that's a huge part. Okay, words and actions match. The other piece that's huge for trust building is to apologize and to take ownership. This is actually something that is the most critical I would be recommending in businesses when you're looking of who you're going to hire and who you're going to promote. Pay attention to how people deal with conflict, and specifically, do they take ownership for their part within a conflict? Because nobody's perfect. So we're all going to have our screw ups and mess. Like nobody's perfect. So everybody should be able to think of a time when they took ownership and they held themselves accountable. Okay, so that's really important. On the family side, when you're working with your kids and we want to help our kids learn in that middle chair, then we want to make sure that we as parents are taking ownership, that we're apologizing, and that we also hold the same standard to our children, and that you actually help them when they're choosing friends and partners. They're looking for people that are actually take ownership. So this is where, again, taking ownership would be huge, and accountability, and then also words and actions matching.
Yeah. Well, and when it comes to words and actions, managing that sense of becoming reliable, I know for me, I spent the first 15 years of my career as an employee on the staff of much larger things. It wasn't until a little over 8 years ago, almost 9 years ago, that I became a business owner, an entrepreneur.
Right.
And I learned that that's where the maturity was missing for me. Was I said yes, yes, yes to everything.
Right.
And then would dig myself a hole that I couldn't get out of.
Yes.
And then be like, how do I not look bad in this situation? Maybe I can say this. So it took time to kind of develop that maturity to say, you know what, own up to it. You overpromised, but here's what I'm going to do instead. And I think, number one, I do think that is part of a personality. However, I think in business, it is something that it took me a little bit of time to really find my voice and be confident that reliability was more important than just saying yes.
Yeah. And it's, and I think part of it also is because nobody can read minds. So even though when somebody is saying yes to certain things, they may have the best of intention. All they want to do is help. All they want to do is please and help and to serve. So it can come from a really honest place, right? Like it can come from a very, very good place. The problem with it is that it's short-sighted, right? Like it's like they're not thinking about, if I over deliver, I'm going to eventually, give me 3 days, I'm going to actually let a person down. So it's almost like helping a person think long-term. What is it I really want, right? And that's hard, right? Because we do a lot of work with healthcare, a lot of healthcare professionals, a lot of healthcare entrepreneurs, dentists, doctors, chiropractors, a lot of people who are like, and they tend to give. And then a lot of times they kind of burn out because they're over giving. They're delivering too much, but they're not actually taking care of themselves. So it's sometimes that tension, right? It's that kind of tension. But like you said, it's beautiful. Like when you think about your own kind of journey and how you put yourself in this new environment, and you had to kind of exercise some different muscles, emotional muscles, which is actually really great.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned, in a way, knowing where you want to go, where you want to be, and kind of goal setting on an internal purpose.
Yes.
But what is it on an external purpose? When you look at a leadership as a mindset of the visionary in a company, to get people to understand, and I think this goes back to communication, but to be able to clearly set goals, to clearly define what your ultimate goal is and how you're going to get there, to me is the only way to really get people to buy in and follow. Even for you, yes, you train people in being a leader, but you have to be a leader yourself to even get to that position. How do you see being a visionary playing into all of this? And what can people work on to make sure that they're understanding how to communicate that?
No, it's a great question. So the first thing, again, that mindset of a leader, regardless of title, we're talking about a mind, this is going to apply for everybody, is having clarity about what you want. So we have a leadership academy. It's called Success Intelligence. And we teach a number of these different modules through courses and live master classes. And so here's kind of like, in a very simplistic way, we actually teach it in 3 different levels. we teach it to businesses and entrepreneurs around kind of getting the visionary to really get clarity about what is it you want as a business owner. What is the vision that you have? What are your goals? What are your values? What are your objectives? Who are the people? How can we assign them? How can we deal with conflict? There's a whole system that it's a whole business system that we actually take them through. And leaders love it. It's a very step-by-step, follow the program, and you're going to kind of like develop your system and kind of grow. We do the exact same thing with individuals and also marriages. It's literally the exact same tool, but we've just reshaped it so that it actually applies to marriages and individuals. So we launched a marriage mastermind a couple of years ago. We had business owners, and they were mostly entrepreneurs, and we had them really get clarity on what is your vision that you have in your marriage. And it was fascinating. A lot of them were like, I don't know. I've done it all on the business side, but I've never done it. We need to get clarity on the family side. Like, how would you, I told him, like, how would your business run if you had no plan? You just kind of showed up in the office and it'd be a free for all. Well, that's how a lot of people run their families. So businesses need systems that start with vision that kind of gets cascaded, and families do actually as well. And so I love doing that with my husband and I lead it together, and we help couples really get clarity about their vision that they actually want for their life. And then how does that impact their goals? What are they going to say yes to? What are they going to say no to? How does that impact their finances? And we get them to kind of create their own system so that it just kind of flows. It's a system that my husband and I created because we've been doing this for 23 years. And then we teach the same system to teenagers and preteens. So we modify it. We modify it based on actually who the audience is, kind of going back to clarity. It's the same leadership principle, but we communicate it and we teach it in a different format depending on our audience. So I love it. I can take, so our leadership course that we do for teenagers, we do it in 2 hours. It's live. And in 2 hours, I will help teenagers and preteens get clarity about their goals that they want for their life, or certainly in that year, and then also how that's going to impact their time management, because goals and time management have to be side by side. And when we have those two things clarity, what happens is our stress comes down and our productivity shoots up. So it's really fun. A lot of times teens will be at the beginning, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, don't worry. We've got all the cheat sheets, and we have a system that we actually teach them. We walk them through. It's very energizing. And it's amazing because once people get clarity on their vision and what they want, everything else starts falling into place. We have to create the system that supports the vision, but the first part is actually getting the vision. And so it's I don't want to say it's easy, but it's a lot simpler than people think it is. I think the biggest thing is it's just a lot of times people just don't know what to do. So I kind of guide them through the process, but it's extremely energizing watching people do, because when you have clarity on that vision, you'll see a whole emotional energy kind of emerge from a person. A lot of people, they don't have a vision for their life, or they don't have a vision for their business. And so they're rambling. And so then they feel like they're spinning. So getting clarity and simplifying and getting clarity on that vision is kind of the first part.
And isn't it so interesting to think that these principles make so much sense that you would have to do this in business, but to not do it in life? Whereas
I know
we're kind of in this, okay, now we're married. That was the end of that. Now we start the marriage. It's interesting to me that we don't think of things in the same terms.
I know. And honestly, when I went from family work into business, I just took all my doctorates in family systems, and I took all what I learned from family systems and applied it to business. It was so transferable. I mean, it was amazing how transferable. And I just incorrectly assumed when I started working with business leaders that they were doing the same. There's a lot of transferable principles in business that you can actually apply to families. And I remember doing it was actually in Chicago. It was a conference I spoke at in Chicago. It was about 100 entrepreneurs. And I said to them, put your hand up if you have a business strategy. And of course, everybody's hand goes up. Put your hand up if you have a strategy for your marriage. And nobody's hand goes up. And I thought, oh my goodness, what has happened? And they're like, we've never thought about it. We've been so invested that we've never even realized that was actually a gap. And so I love doing it. I love doing it. I love teaching it with my husband. That makes it like super fun. And we do it like in person. That one is actually all in person. But it's just a matter of, again, teaching the same principles, things that we know, but now we're going to apply it for a very specific audience. And it energizes couples because you've got clarity. When you've got clarity and of your vision, now it's going to impact your decision-making, your time management, your finances, your stress, and your decision-making. Couples can make a lot more decisions. A lot of couples are like, they have decision fatigue because they don't have a plan.
Yes.
If you don't have a plan, it's like, I don't even know what to have for dinner tonight. Like they can't even figure out what to have for dinner because their brain, and that's what a system simplifies your life. It cuts out a lot of noise. It just kind of takes out it takes out a lot of fat. It takes out a lot of stuff that's on the periphery and just helps you focus on what you really want. And then you start saying no to a whole bunch of stuff. It's very energizing.
Well, it seems like a moment that just clicks because I mean, it's just not the way that we're even taught to think about our personal lives in any way. But this is a way to kind of allow us to reverse engineer.
Yes.
We know what the goal is now. Let's work backward. And what are those steps? And now you can create these micro goals and you're on the same page. It's great. I'm going to be sharing with many families, many of my friends and family, this entire notion.
Well, it's, like we talked about, right? Like, this is why I said at the beginning of the podcast, I'm like, this is for everybody, whether or not you're a business owner, you're a professional, you're a teenager, you're a parent, like you can just see how much ground we actually covered in an hour, right? Like you can just see how transferable it is. And it's simpler than people realize. I really want to give people hope on this. This is not, you don't have to have a big degree to learn this. You can just have a willing and open spirit to learn. And you can learn these tools and apply them and have incredible transformation in your life and business and marriage and parenting. It's the same tools. You just apply it in different. I often say that it's like a language. If you can speak the language in one part, you can learn to speak the language in different parts. But first, we got to speak the language, and that's what those five core skills are.
I know we're very close to time. I have one last question, and this is for all of my senior level listeners or business owners on the business side of things. What is the return on investment for helping develop leaders within and for improving our own leadership? Are there actual tangible things that they can expect once they put this into practice? Yeah,
no, it's a great question. So the ROI on it, it's actually pretty simple. When you think about, so again, when I started doing work in businesses, and I was working originally to senior leaders and managers because there were a lot of companies we were working with were having major retention problems. And I basically learned very quickly, if I don't have a manager sitting in that chair, I'm going to have a problem. Okay, because they're going to have because if they're blaming their employees and they're being super arrogant, I'm going to have a problem. And so you want to make sure that you're really developing your leaders. It's really important that you're actually developing your leaders, because if you don't develop your leaders, you will have a retention problem. And they say about 70 to 80% of people leave companies because of their manager. So you think about the expense when people actually leave their company, the stats kind of vary, but it can be, up to 23% of a person's salary. That's how much it's going to cost a company when somebody walks out the door. Okay. And so this is I was actually just reading another stat actually this morning. It came through my feed. I think it was like Forbes. They said almost 50% of people are actually looking for other jobs because of their manager. But if they just had a manager, kind of like learn how to really lean into it. So there is a definite ROI. The simplest way is hire and promote according to the simplest way. Hire and promote according to that middle chair. But definitely work on developing your managers and your leaders, because there are a lot of people in your team. About 70% of the population sit in those two back chairs. So, and there's a lot of people, they would love to sit in that middle chair. They just don't know how to do it. So, show them. So look for the people that are not necessarily in the middle chair all the time, but that are open and hungry to learn. And so look for those people in your team actually as well, because they're going to give a tremendous investment back to the organization. They're going to have a higher retention and engagement rate. And so I would really be encouraging owners to look for that as well.
Dr. Gordon, this time flew by. I just looked up at the clock. I can't believe we're already here, but I know that you've got to run. So I just want to say these insights are fantastic. The fact that we can take it all the way from business through our personal life and everything in between. I suggest everybody watching and listening now looks you up, goes to your website and follows everything you say, because this is really impactful.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thanks. I hope you got lots of takeaways, and just get that scorecard, dkleadership.org. And it's a great starting point, because a lot of times when I speak, people are like, this is amazing, but where do I start? This is almost like so much. The start, it is a great path forward in terms of a really simple way for you to assess yourself, and it'll highlight in terms of the areas that you're doing well, but areas that you can actually start working on.
I'm actually gonna go do it myself.
Yeah,
the moment we get off here. You've got my word on that.
Awesome. Good stuff.
Well, thank you so much. This was great. And I just really appreciate you being here, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Dr. Karyn Gordon reminds us that leadership isn't just for boardrooms. It's built at the dinner table, in the carpool lane, across Zoom calls and hallway check-ins. It's a language of clarity, ownership, humility, and above all, consistency. We lead not just when we speak, but when we show up again and again with presence, purpose, and self-awareness. So if you're wondering where to begin, start by asking, what chair am I sitting in today? And what kind of leader or parent or partner or person do I want to be tomorrow? To dive deeper, grab our free leadership scorecard at dkleadership.org. It might just help all of us move closer to that middle chair. If you haven't yet, hit subscribe to join our community. And if you've made it this far, I want to thank you for being curious.